Hello everybody, Yukiro here with another video, and we are on chapter 12 of 50 odd something chapters. So we're getting there slowly but surely, and this chapter is, as I mentioned last time, all in first person, because it is being told from Fenrir's point of view. So he's like telling a story to the reader, or Lenarius in this case, but also to the reader. And this is a tale of hate turned to mutual respect, I guess. But anyway, let's get on with the chapter, shall we? I was fairly young when I first met Vaughn. I was sparring with my elder brother Valentine at the time. With our mighty wooden swords, we were practicing our swordsmanship in the castle gardens. As he taught me how to fight, I knew that one day we'd become mighty warriors. Of course, being so young, I was never any good at it back in those days, so it was more playing than actual fighting. My mother and father, the king and queen, were standing near the fountain. Besides them was another couple. I knew them as high-standing nobles, but I was still learning names and ranks back then. Anyway, clinging to his mother's skirt was a young Vaughn. He was really shy back in those days, a vast difference to how he is now. As my brother and I finished our training, we moved over to the adults. We were pretty tired, but both of us were enthusiastic about making our parents proud. My brother was an exceptionally handsome person. You can ask anyone that knew him. He had dark blonde hair, unlike my light blonde hair. And his eyes were deep green too. Everyone said his eyes were like emeralds, and all the ladies loved them. We greeted them as royalty should. Always greet their nobility that visits us. My brother went first. Greetings, Lord and Lady Cadfael. It is a pleasure to meet you again, he said. I could tell that he was speaking very politely to them. Wanting to show my brother that I too could be polite, I copied him as best as I could. Greetings, Lord and Lady Cadfael. I dare say that even my brother was the most handsome one. I most certainly was the cutest one. Prince Fenrir, isn't it? Why, how you've grown since the last we saw you, the noblewoman said to me with a polite smile. You must be, 4 years old now? Such a grown-up young man. At her praise, I stood up straight and proud. At that age, you could have told me almost anything good, and I would have been happy. It was only after this that I noticed the other young boy hiding behind the woman. I was quite curious about the boy, and while pulling on my brother's arm, I said, Look, Valentine, look! I can see him, brother, Valentine said to me with a chuckle. His name is Vaughn, my mother said, as she placed a hand on my head lovingly. And he is going to be staying with us from now on. He is going to be your squire, when you are older, of course. Vaughn only hid further at my mother's words. I thought it was a bit silly to be hiding at his age, since he was older than me, and I let everyone know how much, or rather, how little I thought of him. I wasn't pleased with his reaction towards me at all, and I said with a huff, He's stupid. I do not like him. The adults laughed at me, before my father chided me with a gentle but firm, Try to get along with him, Fenrir. The Cadfaels are one of our most respected and highest noble families. Vaughn is the youngest of 10 children, so it is an honour for him to become potential squire of royalty. The day I celebrated my 11th birthday was when things really changed for me. I was proudly showing off the boar I had killed to my father and brother. Our hunting trip had lasted almost the whole day, but we had caught and killed enough wildlife for a banquet. Vaughn stood next to my horse silently. His expression clearly showed that he did not want to be there, but I had ignored him all day. Once we had hunted enough creatures for a huge feast, my father rode on ahead to have the cooks prepare the meat for the party later on. My brother followed him soon after, leaving me and Vaughn alone for a short time. As my brother waited for me to catch up, he had no idea that I had taunted Vaughn and had scared his own horse away as a cruel joke. I left him there to make his own way back to the castle as it got darker. It was only after we had gotten back to the castle that Valentine had noticed that Fawn had been missing for a while. He turned to me and asked, "Where has Fawn gotten to now?" Shrugging my shoulders in response, I said, "I don't know. And I don't care. He's probably still dragging his feet back in the forest." Needless to say, my brother gave me the most peeved look I had ever seen in my short life. I could tell that he was clearly disappointed in me, and he muttered to me to best go back for him then. "Why?" "He will get back eventually. It isn't like I need him to follow me around like a mindless dog," I replied. My attitude towards Vaughan was rather uncaring. With another, even angrier look to me, my brother said sharply, "Go and look for him. He might be older than you by 5 years, but he is still very much a child. And if you had even bothered to get to know him, you'd know he was afraid of being left alone in the dark. Especially with wolves, and Utopia knows what else is out there after the sun sets. Then he needs to learn to grow up. I don't need a scared baby as my squire. He is the worst fighter I have ever known. Why they shoved him on me I'll never know," I said almost too loudly. Luckily, none of the adults was paying much attention, so my bad manners had gone unnoticed. Naturally, Valentine did not like my reply, and he folded his arms with an even angrier look. I could tell that he was really cross with me at this point. "You were behaving like a spoiled child. How do you think Vaughan feels? He was forced here, to work for a brat that cannot see how lonely he is. Now go and find him, before I tell mother and father," he told me. I was quite hurt at my brother's words, but I saw the truth behind them nonetheless, and offered my brother a weak apology. I looked up to him a great deal, you see, and I was very much dependent on how he viewed me. Of course, there was also the matter of not considering how Vaughan would have felt in his position. Vaughan's parents had basically given him away like an old shoe, since he was of little use to them from a political standpoint. Adding to that, being tormented so often by me, I realised he must have felt isolated, unloved, and unwanted. Realising this, I quickly made my way to the stables and then headed back to where I had seen Vaughan last. I only hoped that I was not too late to make up with him. According to what Vaughan had told me, he had moved to sit under one of the trees. He rested his face upon his knees, and I can only imagine him whimpering quietly as he rocked back and forth. Though he won't tell me if that is true or not. Too much pride, I suppose. Or maybe he just wants to let me continue to feel like a horrible person. Not that he wouldn't be right, or that I wasn't a cruel boy. I was. And there is certainly no forgiving my actions back then. By the time I'd gotten closer to Vaughan, a huge wild boar, bigger than an average beast of its kind, had begun to assault him. I was still a short distance away, but I could see Vaughan panic as he was unable to get up and run in time. In a desperate attempt to protect his face, he had raised his hands from the beast's mauling tusks. Of course, I knew Vaughan couldn't defend himself like that without serious injury, so I forced my horse to ride faster towards him and the boar. The creature must have noticed my horse, as it squealed at her in rage. But before it could attack her, I jumped down, sword in hand. I decapitated the beast with one fell swoop of my blade. It was a rather impressive feat, if I do say so myself. Watching my heroic feat, and that is most certainly what it was, Vaughan's eyes were open wide in shock. He was obviously surprised to see me, and even more dumbfounded that he'd been saved by yours truly. After a moment of me just smirking down at him, Vaughan stumbled as he attempted to run over to me. As he held me, crying his eyes out, I couldn't help but think it was actually quite cute, though I certainly did feel rather guilty that I had put him in danger in the first place. While apologising to Vaughan repeatedly, I comforted him the best I could. It was a little awkward, but I was willing to deal with it if it meant I could honestly make up for all the horrible things I had done to him up to this point. Anyway, I promised Vaughan that from then on, I would help him become stronger, so that not only would he be able to defend himself in the future, but so that his parents would be very proud of him too. Somehow, he forgave me easily and made a promise to always be there for me. I have no idea why, as I know I didn't deserve his forgiveness, but I am very happy nonetheless that he did. By the time we got back to the party, Vaughan told those who asked about his cuts that he got lost in the garden and tripped over. He did not mention my bullying, or our promise to each other. My brother had a good idea that Fawn and myself were on better terms now, but he only offered us a knowing smile. At age 15, I had become a capable warrior, though I was still far from the strongest or the most skilled. My instructors quite often said that I showed a lot of promise, and that it had been claimed that I would become knight captain when my training had finished. Fawn himself had now become a warrior in his own right, and the two of us were almost equal in skill. Though I had a little more experience due to the fact that I started my training earlier. Despite his own training, Fawn's time in the palace had not been any easier. Most of the other knights in training taunted him with the idea that he was not a wanted child. His family did not help the rumours at all either. His parents rarely visited, and his elder brothers and sisters had already started families of their own, keeping every one of them too busy. At 20, he had not even had an offer of marriage. His parents had never arranged one either. Though I don't think he minded much, even in those days. Whenever I had heard the other nobles being mean to Vaughan, I would stand up to them for his sake, and would scold them often, but in doing so, I only fueled the taunting behind our backs more. Still, I couldn't let anyone else bully him, so naturally, I had to defend his honour no matter what consequences. Vaughan soon vowed to prove to the others that he was better than they ever could be, in both skill and strength. Of course, he never did this openly or to their faces. Every noble was of higher rank than he was, so he was limited in what he could do or say to defend himself. His family may have had such a high status, but being the youngest of 10 children, he himself had no claim to any titles and had no land or deeds of his own yet. Even the adults didn't treat Vaughan any better, so I made a promise to him that soon enough he would be worth so much more than any of them. Then he could rub it in their faces. At this stage of our friendship, I knew I'd do anything to help get him there, no matter what it took to prove his status as a noble. Neither of us had any real plans at the time, but we were optimistic, if nothing else. It was within this year that a war started with a group of unhappy mages. No one had discovered silver as a preventative to magic yet, thus more warriors were needed in battle. Fawn and I were sent to the front lines to aid in the fight against these people. It was an unpleasant war, but wars seldom are. Part of my squad included Fawn, Roy, and a city-born elf that had come from the city of Gardo. He had been a guard there and wanted to make a name for himself, though he had no real rank at all in the army. The elven man proved it to everyone that he had a lot of skill in archery. I made him a promise that if we all made it out alive, I would make the boy one of my knights after I became knight captain. The war lasted a little over a year, and thanks to my training, tactics, not to mention my amazing skills in battle, and a lot of help from my comrades, we have finally managed to win the war. You probably wonder why it took so long. Well, if you've never faced an army of angry people throwing fireballs at you, then let me tell you, it is not a fun experience. After everything was said and done, the knight captain retired from his position and handed the rank over to me, confident that I could continue to lead the army into victory against any foe that dared to attack the kingdom. Roy returned to his parents' inn, unable to walk properly due to a leg injury during one of the skirmishes. I had saved his life, but not the use of his leg. Unfortunately, the elven man was killed in battle. The thing about war is that no matter how skilled you think you are, you cannot save everyone. For all the good I did, I could not even save one as young as he was. I felt so guilty over his death that I offered his younger brother the position instead. Sadly, that never came to much, as he ended up going back to Gardo. I'm not sure where he is now, or how he is getting on, but I hope he is well. Despite my personal losses, I was hailed a hero by most of the kingdom, and even had the honour of gaining the title Purple Wolf of Terror. Long ago this title was once given to my ancestor, with the sign that he was a great leader and warrior. Very few had ever gained such a title, and had not been passed down to another Dryston in quite some time. After gaining my new rank and title, I quickly promoted Vaughan as my second-in-command, much to the annoyances of most other noble households. A few months after the war had ended, silver was discovered to prevent spellcasting, along with it, the assumption that it would also stop possession. It was during my father's time. The king had taken a trip to Amiathan City to try and negotiate with the man in power there. During the journey home, a necromancer attacked my father and his group. I was told it was a hard battle, and my father had lost his favourite sword that day, left with only a silver decorative sword that had been a gift from one of the Rattus people. My father's group were able to overcome the man and defeat him. Because of this, trade with the landover of Amiathan increased, and it was made a top priority. My father even went as far as to give the man a noble rank within his court, despite the city not originally being part of our kingdom. Solidified the union, my father offered the newly appointed nobleman's young daughter my hand in marriage. Of course, she was only 10 at the time, and myself only 16, so we were not able to be married until she became of age. When I reached the age of 17, my father, the king, died. It was during a hunting trip to celebrate my birthday. It was something of a tradition for members of the royal family to go hunting for their birthday, you see. Though that should be quite clear by now by how often I spent my birthday doing just that. According to some of the other people there, they believed a stray arrow had caused my father's horse to rear up and land on top of him. He was completely crushed by the beast, and the healers had told us that some of his broken ribs had pierced his lungs. The blame was never directly put on me. Everyone believed that it was one of my stray arrows that had caused the horse to panic. However, I'm most certain that I never shot any arrows near or even in the direction of my father. I believe someone else may have done so, with the intention of killing my father, but I can never find any real proof of this. The supposed arrow was never found, and since it was deemed an accident, no one was punished for what happened. Stepping down from her position as the ruling monarch, my mother, the queen, was too grieved to continue to rule by herself, allowing for my brother to ascend the throne. A few days after our father's death, Valentine married his betrothed later that same year. Vaughan and I continued to work as the army leaders for the new king. We ensured peace stayed throughout the land, and the Guild of Magic was created under my advice to my brother. Those with magic were no longer killed on sight, and were instead trained to protect the kingdom from those who would cause harm to any innocent citizens. It had been 2 years since our father had died, and Valentine had become king. He and his wife went to Amiathan City in my place, as I had been unwell at the time. It is unknown what happened to them after they left the city, as their boats were destroyed in a supposed storm at sea during their trip home. I want to believe that they were nearly lost, and I still have hope that they are alive somewhere, but so far there has not been any sign of them. I still hold out hope, but I have my doubts that they will ever be found. With no choice but to ascend the throne myself, I was appointed king. Despite having almost no training for the role, I was born a spare, and had only been given basic training for the role of king. My duty was to be king's knight captain and advisor, nothing more. As my first act as king, I appointed Vaughan as my knight captain, straight away. After all, I could no longer keep the title, so it needed to be passed on to someone more resourceful and dependable. Thus I gave him the highest standing position within my council. After all, he is the only man I can truly trust besides me to realise my ideals and wishes. Years of realising how two-faced my nobles were towards one another, and their constant games of vying for more power and status from the previous kings, made me realise how untrustworthy they really are. Not to mention, how selfish. And that, my dear followers, is the end of the chapter. It's a very long one, but the exposition is worth it in the end. Because now you can get to see how much of a brat Fenrir used to be. It's called character growth. He can still be a little bit of a brat, because, he is royal. He's used to getting his own way and doing things his way. But he's matured. He's grown up a little bit. Just a little bit. Hopefully you enjoy the chapter nonetheless. From there, we get to go back to everybody and get to see how they handle the news of that the king really was a brat. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed this chapter. It was definitely fun for me to write. But yeah, let me know what you think down below. Obviously, if you like it, like the video. If you don't, dislike it. I'll see you later. Mwah.